Slaughter Bartfast says, JB, you're not as cost and analog sensitive as a lot of us are. Slaughter Bartfast, I reject the argument that HDZero is a cheaper option. When you're comparing analog, DJI, HDZero, and heck, Walksnail, HDZero is just as expensive as DJI. Unless you already own a set of analog goggles with an HDMI input. If you're starting from scratch, the VTX and cameras are the same price. So HDZero isn't cheaper unless you happen to already own the goggles. It's the same price as DJI. And frankly, with the V2 DJI goggles now coming in, I think $469, $475. The V2 DJI goggles are cheaper than an HDO2 and cheaper than an Orca. Especially if you're also buying an HDZero module for $150. HDO goggles, HDO2, what are they running right now? HDO2 Fat Shark Dominator, $500 in stock. $650 for the Fat Shark Dominator 2 with HDZero. $475, $460 for the DJI V2. DJI knew what it was doing, by the way, when they made that price. They absolutely did that on purpose, in my opinion. Now, Orca, the FPV-1 race. Hello, hello, hello. I clicked a link. Now go to the link. What's the... Dagnabbit, get FPV. $485. That's about the same price as the DJI goggles, except you also have to buy the HDZero receiver. So now, granted, those are top tier goggles. You can get goggles a little cheaper. Like if you really stretch, you could get HDZero and a set of goggles for the same price as the DJI goggles. So HDZero not cheaper than DJI, not cheaper than Walksnail, same price, more expensive than analog. The only people so when you say I'm not as cost sensitive, I mean I get that. I'm a professional, and as a professional, I can justify spending money on things in a way that hobbyists can't. I try to keep that into account when I think about reviewing products, of course. I remember the days when buying a $12 motor, I was, oh no, I broke a motor. I gotta spend $12 on a new motor. Can I afford the expensive $20 motors? I remember. I know what that's like. But the main thing, so then what does HDZero have, if not price? And you're right that it's the latency. It has digital image quality with analog style latency. And if that's the thing you can, and it has compatibility with race timing systems. But I think Slaughter Bartfast was replying to me saying that I like DJI better. And I think what he was saying is that I don't mind the expense of DJI and I don't mind the latency, which is true. But Slaughter Bartfast says, I think the wish is that you would influence a thing like the HDO goggles, like the HDZero goggles. It's the closest to open source we got. 100% Slaughter Bartfast. And when I reviewed the HDZero 1-watt Freestyle VTX, I absolutely focused on I try to represent what you might think about the product, not just what I think about the product. So if I were to take a bite of pizza with pineapple on it and go, ew, I actually like pizza with pineapple, I'm sorry to say. But if hypothetically, if I were to take a bite of pizza with pineapple on it and go, oh, I hate this, but I was a product reviewer, I would say, the pineapple pizza, but pineapple adds a sweetness that offsets the saltiness of the pepperoni I would try to ask myself, what do the people who like this like about it? And how can I communicate to you whether you're one of those people? And so the pros of HDZero, when I review those products, I absolutely call them out. When the HDZero goggles come out, I look forward to reviewing them and focusing on the things they do well and the things that, if there's anything, that they could do better, focusing on that as well. As far as the open source thing goes, I don't know about you, but I'm not willing to take a performance hit just to get something that's open source. I love open source, and in cases where open source products also have great performance, like ExpressLRS or, dare I say, Betaflight, I'm all about it. But if you say, give me an open source video link or a closed source video link that has much better range, resolution, and penetration, I'm going to take the second one, clearly. And I know there are people out there who are motivated by an open standard. And as that starts to manifest, here's what I'll say about that. As that starts to manifest, then I may also feel compelled by that. But today we're in a world where only HDZero makes the VTXs, only HDZero makes the goggles. This idea that it will be open is entirely hypothetical. It's intention. They have an intention to do this. If I could buy a Foxeer and a Runcam and a Rush FPV and a TBS HDZero video transmitter, and everybody was competing and everybody's making products, and when one was out of stock, I could buy the other one, and there were 3 different people making HDZero goggles, then this argument that HDZero is open and so it's better for the community absolutely would carry a lot of weight. Right now, that argument is aspirational, which is better than DJI, who has no intention of being open in that way. But also, I'm not going to give them full marks for their intention. They have to actually deliver. And right now, that hasn't been delivered. We're starting to see that. FreeSky has a monitor coming out. I just saw this on Facebook today. It's an HDZero monitor. Yeah, yes. This is the first product where HDZero has supplied the chips and FreeSky has manufactured the product. The HDZero Tandem controller has the FreeSky Tandem controller has an HDZero VTX or receiver in it. Fantastic. That's the kind of thing that as it expands and grows, this potential will be realized. But I don't think the potential has been realized yet. And so I don't think that they get full credit they get partial credit for the intention. Yes, absolutely. No, I think you're being more generous than I would be. Shaddai says HDZero is a community product that actually listens to the community and tries to give us what we want. 1000% yes. Things like the HDZero race receiver. 1000% yes. Carl is a saint and it is doing so much to give the community what they want. 1000% yes. I agree with that wholeheartedly. HDZero doesn't have DJI image quality and penetration, but DJI runs at 1.2 watts. No. DJI, feel free to run DJI at 1,000 milliwatts if you think that'll make a difference, but it won't. It's the difference between H.264 or H.265 encoding with retransmissions and real-time compression with no retransmissions and lower latency. You just can't. I mean, someday somebody will come up with some secret trick quantum encoding that does it. But in general, the reason that DJI has variable latency is that they're doing motion compression and stuff in a way that gives you better performance. Although, as we've seen with Walksnail, DJI's engineering know-how has a lot to do with their great performance, because Walksnail has very similar hardware to DJI and still doesn't perform as well. So it's not that DJI runs at 1.2 watts and Walksnail only runs at, and HDZero only runs at 1 watt. That's nonsense. We as a community need to support it, because that's how other companies get behind it. This is how ELRS got started. There's a difference, though. Let's do a comparison between ELRS and HDZero. And why has ELRS blown up and become wildly popular in a way that HDZero hasn't? By the way, HDZero has significantly grown in popularity, no doubt. But Express LRS, I think, has grown more and has gained wider acceptance. And the reason is that, despite the fact that Express LRS is a giant pain in the ass compared to something like Crossfire or Tracer or Ghost, Express LRS is significantly less expensive because the open source design lets vendors, because there's no proprietary hardware involved. HDZero has this ASIC or whatever. I think it's an ASIC. They have this proprietary chip that only HDZero makes. It's expensive to make, and you can't just buy it off the shelf. And so there is no cost benefit to the open source nature of HDZero. It's still super expensive to make a VTX or a receiver. Whereas with Express LRS, you can make the VTXs and the receivers with off-the-shelf components. That can be sourced in various ways, and there's no licensing fee or uptick or anything like that. The devs make no profit on the hardware. So the hardware is super cheap. That's one of the reasons Express LRS is so compelling. But the other reason, and the reason I think is most relevant, is Express LRS performs as well or better than the things they're competing with. Why did people switch from Crossfire to Express LRS despite the fact that Express LRS is a giant pain in the ass to flash and set up relative to Crossfire, which is not as much of a pain in the ass? It's because they wanted 500 hertz. They wanted 1000 hertz. They wanted things they wanted a tiny receiver with a ceramic antenna that would go in their micro. They wanted a flight controller with Express LRS built in for their tiny whoop. Express LRS gave them something that they could not get. Users of products, customers, consumers, if you want to call them that, are generally only interested in getting a good product at a good price. Very few of them are sort of ideologues who say, open source is what is good for the community, therefore I will buy a worse product because it's open source. They are out there. I know you're out there. You people running LibreOffice and GIMP. Because, God dang it, I will support open source, and I will not use Microsoft Office, and I sure as hell won't use Adobe Photoshop. Oh, I could afford them, but I won't. Yeah, no, I know you're out there. But to gain widespread, rapid adoption, an open source project has to leverage its open source nature to make a better product. Ideally at a lower price. And that's what Express LRS did. And that's what HDZero, with all due respect, has not done. They have made an extremely niche product whose main selling point is it's just as low a latency as analog with better video quality and about the same range, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. And it's way more expensive than analog. And you can see why that's not like oh my God, yeah, slap my credit card down. Why didn't you say so? What, it's 4 times as expensive and has better range and better image quality, maybe. Oh, and the latency is just as good, you say? For some people, that's very compelling, but it's not as widely compelling as it's got twice the range and twice the resolution for 4 times the price. So, all right. I don't get the Express LRS love. Seems like it does the same thing as every other TXRX. Yeah, I mean, it has Crossfire Ghost level of range. It has, modern generation level of range. So it beats the pants off of FreeSky at FreeSky prices is basically the takeaway. My point is this, and then we'll finish talking about this. I think we talked about it long enough. Simply being open source is not enough. And unfortunately, simply listening to the community is not enough. Because most people are going to buy the product that performs the best for them at a price they can tolerate. You're not going to win over the market by showing that you care and delivering things people want, unless by delivering things people want, you make a better product for them. And what I mean by that is, Carl listened to the community and came up with this race receiver that receives both analog and HDZero and outputs HDMI and analog video for the DVR, and has a really, really good analog deinterlacer, so the analog signal is as clean as it's ever been. Fantastic. Who needs that product? Race organizers. Okay, all 27 of them are going to love that product. Carl gets credit and prestige and accolades for doing that. But that doesn't necessarily make people want to buy his product as much as if the product was definitively better. If HDZero definitively had 50% more range than analog, I think that would be a very different situation than if it has about the same range as analog, which is what I see. You need to make a better product. You can't just rely on the fact that you're open source and you're connected with a community. Being open source and being connected with the community has to then result in you making the best product. And unfortunately, if you don't get that last part right, there's a limitation to the degree of success you're going to get. Okay. Enough about that.